My beloved child. There is a moment, so quiet, so easily missed, yet it carries the weight of everything that has been building behind the scenes. And somehow, you've been standing right at the edge of it, without fully realizing how close it has come. Not yesterday, not someday, but now. Something has shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. As if a silent decision has finally been made in a place where words cannot reach. And the truth is, this moment you are stepping into was never random. It has been forming, layer by layer, feeling by feeling, even when it looked like nothing was happening at all. Pause for a second, and feel that. Because what you once thought was distance, what you once interpreted as hesitation, was never absence. It was preparation. A quiet gathering of courage, a slow unraveling of doubt, a heart learning how to speak what it has been holding back for far too long. And here is the part that changes everything. They can't hold it in anymore. Not because they suddenly became someone new, but because something inside them has finally reached its limit. A threshold where silence feels heavier than truth, where holding back feels more painful than stepping forward. You may not have seen it, but they have been walking through an invisible storm. Questions circling in their mind, emotions rising and falling like waves they couldn't fully control. Moments where they almost reached out, and then pulled back at the last second. Why? Because what they feel for you isn't simple. It's not something they could casually express and move on from. It carries depth, meaning, consequence. And when something feels that real, people don't rush. They pause. They overthink. They protect themselves, even from what they truly want. But something changed. Not outside, but within. A realization, quiet but undeniable. That time is no longer something they can hide behind. That waiting has stopped feeling safe, and has started to feel like loss. And that is where everything begins to turn. Stay with this, don't skip. Because this is not about a sudden action, it's about an inner shift that makes action inevitable. There's a difference. One fades, the other transforms everything. And right now, they are standing in that exact space. A space where their emotions are no longer asking for permission. A space where their heart is no longer negotiating with fear. A space where truth is no longer optional. Have you noticed something subtle, something you couldn't quite explain? A change in energy, a feeling that something is about to happen, even if nothing visible has happened yet? That feeling isn't imagined. It's the echo of a decision being formed, before it fully arrives in your world. Because before someone speaks, before they reach out, before they step closer, there is always a moment where everything inside them aligns. Where confusion turns into clarity, hesitation turns into readiness, and silence turns into pressure that can no longer be contained. They are there now. But here's what makes this moment even more powerful. They didn't get here easily. There were nights where they tried to convince themselves to let go, moments where they told themselves it would be easier to stay quiet, safer to keep distance, simpler to ignore what they feel. And for a while, they almost believed it. But feelings like this, they don't disappear just because they are ignored. They deepen. They grow roots. They find their way back to the surface, again and again, until they are finally acknowledged. And now, they have no choice but to acknowledge it. Not because they are being forced, but because they are finally being honest. With themselves, and soon, with you. Something important is waiting for you. But not in the way you expect. It's not just about what they will say, or when they will act, it's about the fact that the version of them who was holding back, is slowly fading away. And the version of them who is ready, is stepping forward, one quiet realization at a time. You might wonder, why now? Why after all this time, after all this silence, after all this uncertainty, why does it suddenly feel like everything is about to change? Because they've reached a point where not expressing how they feel would mean losing something they are no longer willing to lose. And when someone reaches that point, hesitation loses its power. Think about that. Because this isn't about pressure, or urgency, or fear of missing out. It's about clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes after confusion has done its work. The kind that feels calm, steady, undeniable. The kind that doesn't rush, but doesn't wait anymore either. And you are connected to this moment more than you realize. Not because you need to do anything, not because you need to chase or change or force anything, but because your presence in their life has been part of this transformation. Even in silence. Even in distance. Even in moments where nothing seemed to be happening. You were there, in their thoughts, in their reflections, in the quiet spaces where they were trying to understand what they feel and why it matters so much. And now, they understand. Or at least, they understand enough to no longer run from it. Let that settle in. Because something is already unfolding, even if it hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And here's the part that most people don't talk about. Moments like this don't arrive loudly. They don't announce themselves with certainty or clear timelines. They arrive softly, almost invisibly, and then suddenly, everything changes. So if you feel a shift, if you sense something different in the air, if there's a quiet anticipation you can't quite explain, trust that. Because it means you are standing right where something real is about to step forward. Not rushed, not forced, but ready. And just when it feels like you're about to understand exactly what's coming next. There's one more layer, something deeper, something they haven't even fully admitted to themselves yet, but it's already shaping what they're about to do. Something inside them didn't just change. It awakened in a way they can no longer ignore. And the strange part is, they didn't expect it to happen like this. Not now. Not so suddenly. It wasn't a loud realization or a dramatic turning point. It was quiet, almost unnoticeable at first. A feeling that stayed a little longer than usual, a thought that kept returning no matter how many times they tried to distract themselves. And then, it grew. Not in chaos, but in clarity. They started seeing things differently. Conversations that once felt normal now carried meaning. Memories that seemed small suddenly felt significant. Even the silence between you, it began to speak louder than words ever could. Have you ever felt that, when something unspoken starts becoming impossible to ignore? That's where they are. And it's not comfortable. Because clarity doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels overwhelming, like standing in front of a truth you can no longer walk away from. A truth that asks you to choose, to act, to risk being seen. They've been standing in that space, longer than you realize. Balancing between what feels safe, and what feels real. But here's the part that changes everything. Safe is losing its grip on them. The comfort of staying silent, of waiting, of pretending everything is fine, it's no longer enough. It doesn't calm them anymore. It doesn't give them peace. Instead, it creates a quiet tension inside them. A pull they can't explain but also can't resist. Don't skip. Because this is where the moment begins to take shape. They've started asking themselves questions they avoided before. Questions that don't have easy answers, but demand honesty. What if I wait too long? What if I never say it? What if this is something I'm not meant to lose? And every time they ask, the same feeling rises. You. Not just as a memory, not just as someone they once thought about, but as something present. Something real, something unfinished. And that word, unfinished, carries more weight than they expected. Because unfinished things don't disappear. They linger. They echo. They return in the quietest moments, when there are no distractions left, when there is nothing left to hide behind. And lately, they've had more of those moments than ever before. Moments where everything slows down, where their thoughts become clear, where they can no longer pretend they don't feel what they feel. And in those moments, something very specific happens. They imagine what it would be like, if they finally reached out. Not in a perfect way, not with all the right words, but honestly. And instead of fear, something surprising begins to take its place. A sense of relief. As if speaking the truth, even if it changes everything, would finally bring them peace. Stay till the end. Because this is where their internal world begins to shift in a way that leads directly toward you. They are no longer trying to figure it out the way they used to. Before, they analyzed everything. Every possibility, every outcome, every risk. But now, it's different. Now it's not about figuring out. It's about accepting. Accepting that what they feel is real. Accepting that it hasn't gone away. Accepting that no matter how much time passes, you still hold a space in them that nothing else has been able to replace. And that realization, it doesn't come lightly. It comes with weight. Because once you accept something like that, you can't go back to pretending it doesn't exist. And that's exactly where they are. Standing between who they used to be, and who they are becoming. One version of them still whispers. What if it doesn't work? What if it's too late? What if things have changed? But the other version, the one growing stronger every day, says something much quieter, yet much more powerful. What if this is meant to be faced, not avoided? And slowly, that voice is winning. You may not hear it, but they do. In their stillness, in their solitude, in the moments where they can't escape their own thoughts. And with every passing moment, the distance between feeling and action is shrinking. Something important is waiting for you. But it's not rushing toward you in a way that feels chaotic or overwhelming. It's building, intentionally, carefully, almost as if it wants to arrive at the exact right moment. Because this isn't about impulse. It's about readiness. Real readiness. The kind that doesn't come from emotion alone, but from understanding, from reflection, from finally being honest with oneself. And they've been doing that work, even if you never saw it. Even if it looked like nothing was happening. Even if it felt like they were distant, disconnected, or unsure. Behind all of that, something was aligning. And now, that alignment is reaching a point where it can no longer stay hidden. Let me ask you something. Have you felt a quiet pull lately? Not something dramatic, not something obvious, but something subtle, like your attention keeps returning to them, like a part of you senses something shifting? That feeling is not random. It's connected. Because when two people share something real, something that hasn't fully closed, there are moments where both feel the shift, even without communication. And this is one of those moments. They are closer to acting than they have ever been before. But not in a rushed or impulsive way. In a way that feels certain. In a way that feels grounded. In a way that comes from a place deeper than temporary emotion. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because actions that come from that place, they don't fade easily. They don't disappear overnight. They carry intention, meaning, direction. And when they happen, they change things. Not just on the surface, but underneath, where it truly counts. Right now, they are gathering the final pieces of that courage. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind. But the quiet kind that says, I'm ready to face whatever comes next, as long as I'm honest. And honesty is exactly what they've been holding back. Not because they wanted to deceive, but because they weren't ready to be that vulnerable. To say what they truly feel, without knowing how it will be received, without knowing what it will change. That kind of honesty requires something deeper than emotion. It requires trust. Trust in themselves. Trust in what they feel. Trust that even if things don't unfold perfectly, it's still worth expressing. And now, that trust is beginning to form. Slowly, but surely. And once it fully forms, there is nothing left to hold them back. But here's the part that most people overlook. Even when someone is ready, there is always one final hesitation. A small pause, right before action. Not because they are unsure, but because they understand the weight of what they are about to do. And they are in that pause, right now. Standing at the edge of expression. Feeling everything, understanding everything, and knowing that once they take that step, there is no going back to silence. So they breathe. They reflect. They gather themselves, one last time. And in that space, something even deeper begins to surface. A realization that goes beyond just reaching out. A realization about you, about what you mean to them, about why this connection has stayed with them no matter how much time has passed. And that realization is what will shape what happens next. There's a realization forming within them, not rushed, not forced, but undeniable in a way that feels almost surreal. And what makes it so powerful is that it didn't come from outside influence. No one told them. No situation pushed them. It came from a quiet place within, where truth doesn't need permission to exist. They've started to understand something they couldn't see before. Not just that they feel something for you, but why. Pause for a second, because this is where everything deepens. It's easy to recognize feelings. Anyone can say, "I miss you," or "I care." But understanding the reason behind those feelings, that's where things become real. That's where something temporary transforms into something meaningful. And this is exactly what has been unfolding inside them. They've been connecting the moments, the memories, the way you made them feel without even trying. Not in a dramatic way, but in a steady, grounding way that stayed with them long after the moment passed. They've asked themselves, why does this person still cross my mind, even when I try to focus on other things? Why does their presence feel different from everyone else? Why does silence with them feel louder than words with anyone else? And every time they search for answers, they keep arriving at the same place. You were never just a passing connection. You became something that quietly integrated into who they are. And that realization, it doesn't leave space for indifference anymore. Don't skip. Because this is the turning point most people never fully reach. This is where feelings stop being confusing, and start becoming clear. They are beginning to see that what they feel for you isn't something they can categorize easily. It doesn't fit into something casual, or something they can walk away from without consequence. It has depth. It has presence. It has a kind of quiet permanence that doesn't demand attention, but never disappears either. And once someone realizes that, they can't go back to pretending it doesn't matter. But here's where it gets even more intense. They're not just realizing what you mean to them. They're realizing what they almost lost. And that thought, it has changed everything. Because when something feels close to slipping away, when the possibility of never again becomes real, it creates a kind of clarity that nothing else can. Suddenly, all the hesitation, all the overthinking, all the waiting starts to feel unnecessary. Even heavy. And that's what they've been feeling lately. A kind of emotional weight, not because of what exists between you, but because of what hasn't been expressed. Unspoken truth has a weight to it. And they've been carrying it for longer than they expected. At first, it felt manageable. They told themselves they had time. They told themselves they could figure it out later. They told themselves that silence was safer than vulnerability. But now, that silence feels louder than ever. It follows them in quiet moments. It appears in the middle of their day, unexpectedly. It lingers at night, when everything else fades and only their thoughts remain. And in those moments, they can't escape one simple truth. They don't want this to remain unfinished. Stay till the end. Because what they're realizing next is something they didn't anticipate. It's not just about expressing feelings. It's about stepping into a version of themselves they've been avoiding. A version that doesn't hide. A version that doesn't wait endlessly. A version that chooses honesty, even when it feels uncertain. And stepping into that version requires something deeper than courage. It requires acceptance. Acceptance that things may not unfold perfectly. Acceptance that vulnerability comes with risk. Acceptance that they cannot control the outcome, only their truth. And strangely, that acceptance is bringing them peace. Not complete certainty, not guaranteed results. But a calm understanding that this moment is meant to be faced. And when someone reaches that state, action is no longer something they force. It becomes something they naturally move toward. You might not see it yet, but they are already moving. Not physically, not visibly, but internally. And internal movement always comes before external change. They are rehearsing the moment in their mind. Thinking about what they might say. Imagining how it will feel to finally let those words out. And each time they do, it becomes a little less intimidating. A little more real. A little more possible. Until eventually, it no longer feels like something they might do. It feels like something they need to do. Something important is waiting for you. But here's the part that makes this moment even more profound. They're beginning to understand that this isn't just about them. It's about you too. Not in a way that creates pressure, but in a way that creates connection. They've started to think about how you might have felt. What you might have wondered. What silence might have meant from your side. And that perspective, it has softened something in them. Because now, it's not just about expressing what they feel. It's about acknowledging what you may have experienced. The distance. The uncertainty. The unanswered questions. And with that awareness, their intention is changing. It's becoming more thoughtful. More grounded. More real. This is no longer just an emotional impulse. It's a conscious decision. And decisions like that, they don't fade. They move forward. But still, there's one final layer they are moving through. A layer that most people never even recognize. It's the moment where they stop asking, "Is this the right time?" and start realizing, there may never be a perfect time. That realization, it's quiet, but it shifts everything. Because once someone understands that waiting for perfection only leads to more waiting, they begin to value the present moment differently. They begin to see that now, this exact moment, is the only place where something real can happen. And that's exactly where they are standing. Right here. Right now. Between what has been and what is about to unfold. And you might feel it. In ways that are hard to explain. A sense of anticipation. A subtle emotional pull. A quiet knowing that something is about to change. That feeling. is not random. It's the beginning of alignment. Because both of you are moving toward the same moment. From different directions. They are gathering the courage to express. And you are being prepared to receive. But what makes this even more powerful is that they haven't fully seen the depth of what they're about to say yet. There's something still beneath the surface. Something they haven't completely put into words. But it's there. Growing. Waiting. Ready to rise the moment they allow themselves to speak without holding back. And when that happens, when they move beyond careful words, beyond rehearsed thoughts, and into raw honesty, what comes out will carry more truth than anything they've said before. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And real is what changes everything. So as this moment continues to build, as everything quietly aligns, as they move closer and closer to that final step, there's just one thing left. One final realization. That will remove the last trace of hesitation they've been holding on to. And once that happens, nothing will stand between what they feel and what they're about to do.